Welcome everyone to today's Target Ed. This is Competing in Saturated Funding Markets. My name is David Gates, and I'm the Senior Director of Online Education here at Grant Station. Your presenter today is Alice Ruhnke. Alice is the President of Education and Outreach at Grant Station, and having raised over $45 million from federal, state, and private grant makers, she knows what it takes to get funded. And she's going to share that expertise with you. So please welcome Alice Ruhnke.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you all for being here. We have a great big crowd, so we're going to go ahead and just get started. So what we're going to talk about today is starting at the very beginning of the process of submitting proposals, and that's really finding those funding opportunities that are the best ones to match your organization and the work that you do. To do a little plug, if you don't know who GrantStation is, we do have the databases to help you find the funders and tools and resources all around that. So if you are looking for a GrantStation membership to do your prospecting, we are on sale right now for $199 a year. And I encourage you to take the opportunity to purchase that if you need it. The second part that we're going to talk about in the session today is about our organizational background and how we position our organization as the organization to be funded, and what are the things that funders are looking for so that they kind of see that very easily, that you're the one that really should garner their attention. We're going to talk about executive summaries, thinking a little bit more of as you are kind of reaching out to funders and talking to them, what is that information that's going to help you build that relationship with that funder, get across the information that you need to very quickly about who you are and what you do, as kind of that gatekeeping to the next level of being able to apply. And then just tips all around about writing with the reviewers in mind and the things that kind of do's and don'ts to make your application stand out in the crowd and increase your competitiveness. And then, like David said, we'll have time for questions and answers. So go ahead and put those in the Q&A box as we go through. So just kind of starting with where we are at, we know that this is a very challenging time for nonprofits. Government funding is very uncertain. Things that we used to be able to count on are no longer there or kind of reconfigured. And because of that uncertainty, more nonprofits are going to the private grant makers to kind of pick up some of that slack that the government funding is no longer taking care of. So the competition is really increasing there. And then you might also be finding that you just have increased need as some of the kind of maybe some of the safety net programs are going away, or some of the kind of standard programs that maybe were in your communities, that the funding for those have been cut. So a lot of you are also at the same time finding that increased need, which really, which means you need more dollars. And then again, as that government grants are, in that uncertainty, then a lot of nonprofits are reaching out to individual donors, and that competition is increasing. So this is a perfectly timed series as to how we create that competitiveness within our own proposals. So some of the things that we're going to talk through, as in more detail and with more specifics as we go through, is first finding that alignment between you and the funder. And we're going to talk about that in some detail first. And then as you're writing, there is going to be some adjustment to your language. And there's two ways that you might see that. One is if you are working with government grants, how you're going to have to at times change your language because there are different words that the government, you don't want to use in proposals anymore. So you're going to have to adjust that. But also with that adjusting your language, it's also about how do you kind of tailor each application to really talk the funder's language. So that kind of ties into understanding the reviewer and again, how you're positioning yourself with each funding application. And then an overall shift that we're kind of seeing, this is not with every opportunity that's out there, but that there has been a shift, especially with government funding, but it could be trickling down to foundation funding as well, of also demonstrating our economic or our workforce impact in addition to the social impact of what we do. So not only talking about, the good we do and how we help people change, but how that overall helps reduce spending on things. And so how your programs are actually um, net positive to the process as opposed to negative, or the impact that you have on workforce related issues. So these are all kinds of things that we will talk about throughout this session, and in more detail. So as we talk about that competition, I think everyone has a different, what I'm just calling competition tolerance. There's no right or wrong for this. I've seen people who, really want everything to be perfectly aligned. At some level, they don't want a lot of gray areas as to, if this is going to be a good return on investment. And then I see others on the other end of the spectrum where they're still, I want to go after anything that I could possibly get. And that's your own organization and how you want to address that, right? So no right or wrong, just realizing that everyone kind of has a different philosophy or tolerance level for what they want. And as you're making those decisions, there's going to be internal things to your organization that you really want to consider, and external things to your organization, things that you maybe don't have as much, much of a control over, but they would help you decide if you're competitive or not. And those things all come from a decision matrix that allows you to decide which ones are the best return on investment for your organization and with your own tolerance level for competition, and which ones maybe you set to the side, and those sorts of things. So we're going to talk about all of that in some detail here first. So, kind of talking about a decision matrix, what that is it's establishing the criteria as a first step of how you need to make decisions. What are those unique characteristics to your organization? When you're evaluating if this funding opportunity is a good one for you to pursue or one that you might want to hold off on. And organizations can have completely different criteria because they're unique organizations. And so sometimes, like I said, these criteria can be internal. So based on, for example, the amount of time you have or the amount of human resources that you have to write the applications. That's going to vary from place to place as to how much you have, and then how much you kind of are going to use that criteria as a consideration if you apply or don't. There's other examples, and this list is just a set of examples that are more external to your organization. So, that the funder requires, let's say, an audit. And if you don't have an audit, then you can't apply for the grant. Or if there's matching funds, and are they required, and do you have them? And so those are kind of what I would consider more external factors, that you have to kind of manage and rate, if you will, to see if this is the best funding opportunity for you. So this list here is just kind of a catch-all list that you can use independently on your own. You could put it in a spreadsheet if you wanted to and take each application and rate these different characteristics. And I'm going to show you that in a second. If you do have a GrantStation membership, these criteria are baked into your dashboard. So you can use that one already created for you. but you can create your own. And looking at the next steps in this, once you have that criteria identified, then you're going to put a rating scale to it. You could do, I think I would recommend between like 1 and 3 to start out with to test. And then as maybe your organization, if you get more complex or if you have more opportunities that you want to, evaluate and those sorts of things, maybe you go to a 1 to 5 scale. But I would start small with 1 to 3, see how things kind of really come out for you. And then if you decide that you need to be, have a larger rating scale, you can do that. And as you're taking each criteria and you're scoring it, I also encourage you to work with others at your organization. This doesn't have to be a big giant committee. Probably that's not something that you'd want to do to look at every single funding opportunity and decide. But I would think that if you are, say, more on the program side and you're evaluating different funding opportunities, you might want someone also maybe on the finance side, also evaluating the same opportunities, just because you might be looking at things from different perspectives, which are both very important to your organization. So I encourage you to have like some different eyes on these criteria as you're deciding which ones to apply to. So the third step is then creating kind of like your key as which ones you're going to apply to and how you're going to rank your opportunities. So in my scoring key here is this example. You can see I just used the 1 to 3. And then they had this kind of green light, yellow light, red light kind of system of, if you scored at 20 points or higher, then these are the ones we're going to prioritize as our like A list, our number ones that we're going to make sure that we put all the resources around to get these applications in. Anything that was a 15 to 19, it might be something that, you take to leadership or you prioritized lower, maybe at a B level. Once all the A ones are done, you will look at these, but you're not going to rank them as A yet. And then there's just going to be those that kind of drop off at some level where you're like, these, there's just not enough. We don't have enough ready or align well enough with this funding opportunity to even spend our time on. So you'll, like I said, decide which scoring rank you want and then where your cutoff range is. And here you can see here that this organization, that they looked through all those different criteria. These were the ones that were the most important to them of, being consistent with their mission, having the partnerships, having a relationship with the funder, having the ability to manage it, having the adequate staffing, being able to secure the match. And so they went through and ranked themselves as, 3 being high on certain areas, 2 in the middle. They didn't have any ones and they came up with a 25 as a score. So this particular funding opportunity is one that they wanted to put on their A list. They felt that they were competitive enough to really give it a go with this application. So that's kind of the first step in the process, is really finding out which ones are the best ones to help your organization move forward, and the ones that will help you have the best return on investment. So the second part of what we're going to talk about is working with our organizational background. And so if you've ever taken a GrantStation workshop before with me, you'll have seen this project planning framework. This is something that I use to teach how to write grants and how we put all that information that we need in this framework, how we connect all the pieces together so that we're really telling a coherent and consistent story. And how, as we use this framework and we do that planning that's needed to put all these pieces together, then once you've done it once and you've planned that project or initiative out, it's way easier to take this information and then tailor it to each funder. than it is to start at the beginning, with every funding opportunity. So we will kind of use this throughout the series. If you decide to take it, if not, you can take what you gleaned today and run with it. But we're going to start here with that organizational background section and how we can make that really strong and really help the funder see that we are the organization that has the solutions to deal with whatever challenges it is that you are dealing with. So when we look at that organizational background section, what we're really doing here is establishing our credibility as an organization that gets things done and has solutions. And so there could be different words that funders use for this section. Some may call it an organizational background. Some may call it a profile of the organization, an applicant overview. There's all sorts of different terms that funders use, but there will be a section in 99% of applications where you're sharing information about your organization and you're really trying to build confidence in the reviewer's ability to know that you can do the work. So here are really common elements to a background section of your organization's history. And we'll talk about all of these. Then your mission and special bonus points if you align the mission of your organization or your project with what the mission of that funder is. We'll talk about that. Sometimes in this section, not always, but sometimes there's information about kind of the overall structure of your organization, a high level look at your organization and how you are organized. So that could be that you have a 501c3 status, you have a 10-member volunteer board of directors, you have 2 staff, you have 18 volunteers, those kinds of things, kind of a high level look at your ability to do the work as an organization. And then most of this section is really talking about the initiatives or programs or whatever term it is that you use, the things that you offer, and really infusing those accomplishments and strengths into that. So really talking about your organization's strengths, talking about how you have made change, positive change in your community or with your target population over time. Why are you the best organization to meet these needs? Those sorts of things, and really spelling out that information. As you're writing that section, I have a few tips here. The first one is don't assume that the reader knows anything about your organization, the work you do, as you write the rest of the proposal, how you do it, and how you evaluate it, and all of those sorts of things. Don't assume that your reputation is already out there and everybody knows about us and those sorts of things. That is not the case. And they're not going to do any additional research on you. They're going to read your application and that's what they're going to judge your background on. So treat everything as a blank slate of educating about the great work that you do in your different programs and projects. I also don't overload that section with a lot of history or a lot of philosophical issues about how we operate and those sorts of things. I think it's really important to show you have a history in the community if you do. But I would use that as kind of, a shorter paragraph or a few, sentences around, how you've been, woven into the fabric of the community through your years of service and those sorts of things. But I'm spending more time talking about what you do now versus everything you've done in the past. Again, I think it's important to show the history, but don't spend all your time on the history. And then this is kind of a weird little one, but the last one of highlighting the programs and accomplishments that are most relevant to the proposal. So when you're writing that background section, you maybe have 3 different initiatives that your organization operates. And so let's say you have a food pantry and a financial literacy program and a housing initiative, let's say. You would tell the reviewer in that organizational background about all three programs. But I'm going to spend, if I'm writing for the financial literacy program, I'm going to spend more time telling you more information about the accomplishments and success of that financial literacy program than I am on the housing initiative or whatever I said first, the food pantry. So, you're going to focus more on the one that you're writing for so that they can really see that you have a track record of serving that population, of doing good work and making a difference. A couple of other writing tips as you're writing this background section is to be interesting and engaging. This is for any application and every section. And so somewhere in an application, I'm usually always writing some side of story and kind of painting a picture of a person who's interacted in this program and how they, walked in with this set of circumstances and walked out in a better place, and kind of putting a face to the generic support that you offer, not with identifiable information or anything like that. If I don't have that much space, I might just be using a pull quote or something like that of something that somebody said. But I'm always trying to really tug at both the heartstrings of the reviewer and the mind of the information that they need. And as you're writing this background section, I really encourage you to think of what makes you unique, and what makes you the best organization to meet this need. We're not doing that in any way of disparaging other, kind of competing organizations, if you will. It's really about your strengths and where you shine, and you shouldn't be putting anybody else down, but really showing why are you the one that they should select? And so seriously thinking about that and having your, discussion points around that as you're writing that background section is really important. And then as you're writing, also just identifying yourself as that good investment, that you are, again, the organization that should be doing this. You're strong, you're viable, you have solutions. And if this funder invests in you, you will make a difference in your community or with your target population or, whatever it is that you're doing. So being really aware of kind of answering these questions as you are, um, um, putting your applications together. Just a couple of more things on this organizational background. One of the nice things about this section is generally we don't change a lot during 1 year, as in like if we offer these three programs, we usually offer them all year. So this is a great section that once a year you can come into this section. You can write a template of those things I spoke about: history, mission, organization, initiatives and programs, and accomplishments. You can make it as long as you want because you're not going to submit this particular one. You're going to pull from it. And you can come in and write this. And then throughout the year, then anyone on staff, or if you have volunteers or whatever, can then come to this organizational background section and pull information from it and tailor it then to each funder. And it can really just save you a lot of time. Everybody's not starting from scratch every time they're writing an organizational background. And it also really helps with that consistent messaging that anybody who's writing the applications is telling the same story, to a funder with very consistent words and the information on the things that you've changed and your strengths and your uniqueness and those sorts of things. So really encourage you to do that because that will save you a lot of time and allow you to submit more applications overall. Here's just a little bit of information on kind of what makes an organizational background section really strong and then what makes it weak. And so some of the things that funders are always looking for the strongest organizational background is that you have that history of success in operating similar programs. So they see that you've done this before, um, and that you've operated these programs, and that you demonstrated that you make a difference in people's lives, and those sorts of things, that you've done it before. Also looking at just the organization, how long, you have that little bit of history in there, you have, how you're structured, that you're a competent, strong, viable organization that can get things done. You can then kind of see how things get chipped away as you kind of move down to weaker sections of, well, maybe you've operated similar programs and had some success. So you're, reaching out to a new, kind of program that you're offering. You have pretty good structure. And then you can kind of read on your own of, that you've never really done this work before. There's a lot of weaknesses in your structure, those sorts of things. So the other thing here is I do think that one of the most confusing things about grant writing is how nonprofits, or how funders always use different terms that mean the same things. And yet, in all reality, they're really all looking for the same information. So that's where that planning framework really comes into, to be a very useful tool to help you, because I'm calling it an organizational background, but other funders may use all these different. What's your organizational description? And so I just kind of want you to see that even though they're using different terms, that they're still looking for the same thing, and that is to establish your organization's credibility. And then what you want to do is to then use the funder's terms. So even though, again, you planned it out calling it an organizational background section, if they ask for organizational description, that's the header that you're going to use. You're going to use their words, their headers, their format right back to them. So here's just kind of words that all mean the same thing, to help you through that process. Some different ways when we're looking at that, we've already talked a little bit about like finding the right funder. But then when we were also talking about stating your mission, and then also connecting that and finding that connective tissue between your mission, and what the funder is trying to do. Using that funder's language in that and tailoring, you're not going to tailor your mission statement, but you're going to tailor how your mission statement, their mission or their goals and purposes align with your mission statement. So this is just an example of like a profile from a grant from our database of a funder, the Patterson Foundation. And so you can look in here and see, what kind of words that they're using, and what their programs, what the purposes of their programs are, and how you can then integrate, again, your mission in with their purpose. So if you were looking to do something with oral health with this foundation, really talking about how you share that vision to expand access to restorative and emergency dental care for individuals in need, right? Kind of parroting back their words, aligning your programs with the way that they're kind of defining things. That may seem sometimes like stealing or counterintuitive, but I parrot their stuff back to them all the time to show exactly how this organization or program aligns with what they're trying, the issues they're trying to solve. So, you can do that from their websites, from their profiles, and those sorts of things. Some other ways to enhance that background section, making sure that you have the ability to demonstrate the impact that you've had through your programs and initiatives. So having that evaluation process in place that has shown how many, not only like how many people you've served and the work that you do, but how many people have changed for the better, because of your programs and projects. And so you want to make sure that you do have that process so that you can educate the reviewer then on how you have made a difference, to individuals in your community. And so you have to have that process in place first so that you can then communicate it. Highlighting your organizational strengths. Again, this background section is really a time to shine. It's not a time to feel like you're bragging. You want to be honest and you want to be truthful, but it is time to really share with them why you are the best and what your strengths are and what you're good at and what you're unique, how you're unique from others. A lot of times with that pilot program as a next bullet, once in a while, maybe we don't have an exact track record with that particular target population in that particular community. But if you have, let's say you're taking a project that you've done in one community and you're expanding it to another community, I think it's easy to make that translation that, hey, we have done this work with other people. These are the outcomes that we've had. This is the success we've had. And now we're branching out to this other community to do it. That adds to that strength for that funder to really say, okay, they've not done it here, but they've had success. Or it could be that maybe you're taking a target population that you dealt with for, throughout your organization, and maybe you're adding a new service to that. So let's say you did have the food pantry, and now you're adding that financial literacy program. So you can't necessarily show that you've had the financial literacy program first when you're, first starting something new, but then talking about how you've served the target population and how you've served them with success can really help them see that track record, even if it's not exactly aligned. And really, funders don't like the idea of, hey, if I build it, they will come. They want to see your track record. And even if you've done it all volunteer, that's still a track record. So I've had a lot of organizations that I've worked with that have gone from, they outgrew, being a volunteer organization and they're out there trying to find funds for the first time. And everything they've done has been volunteer, but that is still a track record. The difference that they've made in people's lives, it's still documented. And we use that information to demonstrate the strengths of the organization, the solutions that they provided, and the difference that they made. And now we're just asking for dollars for that program. But generally, if you're kind of saying, yeah, we've never done this, we've never worked with this target population, we've never done this work before. If you fund this program, it will work out. That's generally a much harder sell than if you can demonstrate based on what you've done, what you can do in the future. Another little tip that I have for you before we move on to the executive background section, and I'm already running late, is to look at great grant applications. It's a great way to learn how to write successful grant applications. And we have those on our website, and this is a free if you have a membership or not. You can go to write proposals, you can go to award-winning proposals and start to read different private and government grants. We have lots of different areas of interest that you can look at and seeing how these are fantastic, spectacular grants. And reading through those can really teach you how to do that yourself as well. So looking at the background section, looking at needs sections, whatever. All right. So the executive summary section, this is a little bit more than a lot of times if you're writing government grants, you might see where they ask for an abstract or something like that. But this, and usually when they say that, they tell you everything they want in it. But this is more kind of when you're trying to get that summary down of who you are and you're selling that idea to a funder while, over email, or you're selling it in a face-to-face meeting or a Zoom meeting or anything else. Having that really quick look at what you do and having it in that summary. These are the things that, because you want to be a little bit more direct and shorter in what you're sharing, these are the things that I would include, the need, the problem, the organization. Again, why are you the best? Why are you the credible one? what are you doing that works, right? And what your solution is, and then kind of what your value is. Why does this matter? And why should you be funded? And I am running a little slow or a little bit behind, so I might have you come back to this a little bit. But I have just like a before and after, where here's just an example. Inherently, when you look at the before, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, so to speak, except for it's very generic and it doesn't have enough details and data and urgency to actually kind of get you standing out at this moment. And so you can just see I highlighted just things that I just thought are too generic, a variety of initiatives, or we will help more students, or we'll have a positive impact. Like really putting more effort into providing those details that make you stand out. And so again, here you can see just a different way of taking the same kind of program and really talking more and providing that urgency, providing the details and the data that really help the funder understand that you have that track record. They can really see what you've done. And then how this program, is going to help you serve another 150 students in the future. You have this waiting list of students that really want to participate, and how your program is so important because of what the gaps are out there, and so in this particular one of just programs that are being cut, and so these don't exist in the community. So some of those, when you're looking at that executive summary, some of those improvements were being more specific about what you're asking for, and the purpose. Having real data and urgency to really define that need. And whenever I'm writing in that kind of area, I like to kind of take people on a journey with data, to really, I don't like to just put data out there and then say, okay, they'll see the problem. I like to say a lot of times, here's the problem. So I'm making them walk down this path with me. And then I follow all that up with the data that supports that. And then, the ending set, part will either reiterate that or then kind of transition to the next section of then how we're meeting that need or what we're going to achieve with that program. So having that data is very important, being more specific about your outcomes and not being vague and just talking about things in generalities. What makes you unique and really putting that out there, and just even having two sentences: we are unique because A, B, and C. Kind of the why now. What's the urgency? Why is this so important right now? That's how we started this webinar. Why is this important right now? So really sharing that with them up front. And then just kind of not having that fluff in there. And I don't consider, storytelling fluff, but I do consider vague words and sentences and things that kind of are just general statements to be fluff. And so you want to be more direct and kind of come from that kind of confident uh, written word about who you are and what you do. So one kind of thing that I really want you to realize with those executive summaries is sometimes we think of it as just a recap. Let me just go back and take a little bit of everything and rewrite it and show them everything. But it's really a positioning statement, right? It's really about positioning your organization as the organization to get this stuff done. And so again, if you kind of look at it through that lens, you'll probably write it just a little bit different than if you're just providing a summary, right? Because you're going to have that urgency in there and you're going to have those specifics and all those sorts of things. Writing with the reviewers in mind is the last thing that we're going to talk about. And if, they really have to work to understand your programs and your projects and what you're doing and how you're doing them and who you are, that's this section, right? And you've already lost them. And so a few tips around there is realizing that reviewers They can be paid reviewers who work for a foundation or a state agency. They can also be volunteer reviewers who are just people who, like you and me, who care and volunteer our time. And so, either way, they're very busy people and they kind of want you to get those points made up front. And again, they don't necessarily know about you or who you are, how you do it, or who you serve, or what's going on. So again, don't make those assumptions that I spoke about earlier. Really try to avoid that jargon that's kind of in your field. These folks don't work in your field every day, so they're not going to understand it. And really make sure you spell out all acronyms and things like that. And the rest of these things, I think I've kind of spoke about, so I don't know that we have to go into a whole lot of detail. But having that well proofread and appropriate grammar, that's not something usually that's going to get you knocked out of a grant, but it's something that helps. If it makes sense and if it's written appropriately, it's just going to help the reviewer understand it better. And then also just again with your writing, be interesting, be creative in how you're trying to draw people into the story. And again, a lot of times I like to use people's stories, participant stories, in a anonymous sort of way to really help them see on the ground how this program is operating and why it's so important. Like David said at the beginning, this is the first in our Quarter 2 Target Ed series. So if you would like to continue with us and kind of go through a lot of the rest of that planning framework and how we then do some advanced grant writing, you can join the rest of the series. If you want to pick up one of these, you can do it that way as well. But we would love to have you join us. And if you would like to join our online learning academy, which is which for $399 with this discount, you can get access to all of our online education for 1 year. We're offering that to anyone who's taken a GrantStation webinar. So that's also an opportunity that you have if you would like to join our online learning academy. So with all of that, I think we will go ahead and look at some of those questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Alice. So we have a few questions already, and we'll try to get to as many as we can today. There's been a lot of questions about word counts, so just wanted to address that right off the bat, or character counts.
Yep.
Teresa kind of summed it up. How can we be interesting and engaging in 250 characters? So many apps now have extremely little space to even give the basics. I have a hard time using stories for this reason.
Yeah, and I agree, Teresa. I mean, sometimes it's just ridiculous, the very few amount of characters that you can have. And so I kind of balance it. I mean, I think sometimes it's like, okay, I really can't use any other words or spaces or letters with a story because it's just too tight. And then sometimes I try to think of how I could weave in, even if it's a sentence that might be very powerful to telling the story that I'm trying to tell. Another thing that we really do find, like different ChatGPT and Claude and those kinds of things, they do a really nice job of keeping the most important things at the top and helping you narrow down some of that word count. So I do encourage using those tools for that because they're very effective at that and helping say these 3 points don't get lost, and helping you bring that to the forefront of the character space that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yep, makes sense. Then there were a few questions kind of related to advocacy. So Kristen said, my organization's mission isn't one that directly affects people. Would that make a difference in how you write a grant?
Well, I'm assuming, Kristen, that your organization, well, it probably directly affects people in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But I've worked for an organization that was an intermediary organization. And so we also didn't like serve the target population. We served organizations who served the target population. And again, that was very important. right? And so I don't think that writing a grant was different. It was just about how do I show that the work that we're doing with these organizations helps the community in general. And so taking that journey, what are those things that we make a difference in our world that then ultimately impact a community, a target population, whatever. So I would encourage you to kind of take those steps and figure out, how your organization then serves a larger context or that target population or geographic area.
Right. Then some questions related to funders are who do not accept unsolicited LOIs. So Sarita says, what are the strategies for prospecting foundations that do not accept unsolicited LOIs or proposals, or small family foundations that do not have formal grant processes?
Yes. So that's where I think that executive summary comes in. Because if they don't accept unsolicited proposals, a lot of times it's just hard to get in at all. And so having that quick, kind of one page snapshot that really tells all those things that were on that page about executive summaries is where I would spend the time getting that down really well, getting that to its best ability, because that's the only way they're going to read it, if it's quick and if it's impactful. And well, the only way that they're going to read it if it's quick. The only way it's going to be impactful is if you have that information that then really they're like, okay, I'm interested. It's a longer term strategy to really get into those foundations that don't accept unsolicited applications. So I would, realize that, and you're really going to have to convince them of that alignment between them and you, and again, why you're the best. So it's going to be
hmm
harder, but it can be done.
Yep, makes sense.
Mhm.
Teresa says the credible relationship with the funder is where a lot of organizations feel confusion. What counts as a credible relationship? Many funders don't want contact or won't return contacts. How do you do this?
Yeah. So agreed. That, and also it's like a credible relationship. That, my credible relationship is different from your credible relationship as well, right? It's not, it's a little more subjective. And so there are going to be still going to be those funders who really don't want to have a conversation with you. They will accept an application from you, but they're not going to, you know, connect with you in any way and those sorts of things. And there's not a lot you can do about that. And so I think that again, if you're looking at that decision matrix and it's something that, you know, it's something that you really feel you have this strong alignment on, and that sort of thing, but you can't build a relationship with them, that might negate things, right? That you're like, okay, well, we don't. That's not the most important thing to us, though. It's more important that we've shown that we've done this work before, that we can show what we, our successes and those kinds of things in the past. So sometimes that's kind of just something you balance. And like
hmm
I said, everyone's going to have a different kind of tolerance for that or what they're calling a good relationship.
hmm
It's just subjective. So
Yep.
you'll find the right spot for you as you kind of go through the process of applying and developing relationships and things like that.
Yep, makes sense. Pearl says, will we focus on a specific program which we are applying for in the organizational section itself, or do we wait for the program section?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what you really are doing when you're telling about your organization, you're going to tell about like everything that you do, not in tons and tons of detail, right? But like you'll show the breadth of all the programs that you offer. But like I said, in that background section, you're going to spend more time talking about the program that you're applying for, the success you've had with that program, the outcomes you've achieved, the number of people you've served, all those kinds of things. So kind of might just be in one sentence you share everything else that you do, but then you have a whole paragraph talking about the particular program that you're writing for.
Yep, makes sense. Then Teresa says, how do you address that so many funders seem to want new programs and services? One client has a successful program and needs funding to keep it going, but that doesn't seem to be super appealing to funders.
Yeah, I think that if that almost has to get back a little bit. I mean, again, if a funder's like, I only fund new programs and not existing programs, I don't know that you get around that. But I do feel like as you're kind of talking about, that urgency, kind of finding, what those gaps are, why is it important now, and being able to answer, why this program is so important, even if it's new or not. That might be something that you need to spend a little more time on improving or, boostering up, so that they can really see that even though it's not a new program, it certainly is something that makes a difference. It provides solutions to problems, and you're communicating that to the funder.
Yep. Then Karen said several are having issues with funders thinking we are too financially stable and don't need their grants. Any
Mm.
ideas on that?
Um,
Sounded like these were larger organizations where it seemed
yeah,
like maybe
yeah. I
the
think
grant dollars wouldn't be as.
that is a good I think that where they're going to see in the written narrative of your entire grant, the project narrative, there's not going to be a lot of information about money in there. That's about your programs, what you do them, how you evaluate them, all those sorts of things. Now, your budget is then going to have that information of what you need versus how much you need. So your budgets are going to show that you have $100,000, but you need $120,000. Those sorts of things. So that's where I would spend that time in that budget and budget narrative, really highlighting, kind of why you need this, those sorts of things, the financial aspects of it. Um, and then perhaps it's maybe just having a meeting with them as well, if you can, to demonstrate and talk through why you need the funding, the actual dollars that you need. And there might be certain, monies that you may have are restricted and you don't have access to them, or whatever the reason is. And kind of talking that through with them so they see your financials more clearly, than maybe what they appear on the page.
Mm-hmm. Great. Maureen says, what grade level should we be writing at?
Yeah, there is probably an answer for that. And I don't really have it off the top of my head. Um, a low level. I write very simply, that, certainly anybody in high school could read it and understand it. So there probably is, I would maybe just look online for what maybe a good standard is of that. But then I know with a lot of like, AI tools, you can also kind of go in and say, this grade level, can you make this at this such and such grade level? And so those tools are also really good to help you do that. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say for me, there's probably a real answer, but I kind of like a high schooler to me could read the stuff I wrote and understand it.
Yep. Douglas says one of our largest issues is that our mission covers people with developmental disabilities who don't garner the same support like animals, children with food insecurity, or people who are unhoused. How do we bring ourselves into the forefront to show that we do support an important group of people? Also, we're an advocacy and referral, so we're not doing direct support.
So I think with that, I mean, I think really, showing the challenges that individuals with disabilities, what they face. I think that's about writing that needs section in such a way that people, the reviewers or funders, really see, that there's gaps in, how they access healthcare, and maybe what their, you know how they earn a living, or kind of whatever it is that you're doing. I think there is a lot of data out there to show that individuals with disabilities, you know that they get that they have lower, um, kind of outcomes and things like that. And so I think that's part of weaving that story to the funder about, what those challenges are. And I think there's plenty of data to support it, out there of what, where those negative outcomes are. And then I also think looking at advocacy and referral, again, you want to have something that supports, like you want to have some outcomes for the advocacy and referral work that you do. And so being able to talk about, what difference your advocacy made in people's lives, or it might be in the issue overall in your community, how, other organizations are addressing individuals with disabilities, those sorts of things. So I think that you want to take those major things that you do of advocacy and referral and be able to say the difference that those made in the lives of people with disabilities.
Yep, makes sense. And then Jill says, we are a private school for kids with dyslexia with 25% of our students attending with tuition paid by their county. How do we make the case that though we charge tuition, the tuition basically covers salaries and program supplies, not capital campaigns or infrastructure changes?
Well, I think Jill, if you were writing for let's say you were having some sort of capital campaign, or building a building, I think that those kinds of initiatives are a little bit separate from the day-to-day services that you provide. So I think that you're going to want to go in with the need for the capital campaign, or the need for that enhanced infrastructure, and why that will help kids with dyslexia, those sorts of things. And so to me, those kinds of projects, and we do have like webinars on capital campaigns, because they're just a different way you write, way you think, than in just a kind of a traditional program grant where you're writing for those kids with dyslexia and getting funds for program supplies. So I think you probably, before you engage in something big like a capital campaign or building a building or something like that, I would really look at some education around how you frame up those types of projects, and how what the differences are in how you do your outreach.
Makes sense. I think we have time for one last question. What is the best approach for aligning an organization's mission and programs with government grant opportunities when the organization's core language and framing no longer closely match current funding priorities, i.e. DEI initiatives?
Yeah, that's a really tough one, because when we are looking at some government grants right now, there are just terms like DEI that they don't want to see in the application. And so I would start using, again, things like ChatGPT, of what are some other words for this? What are some other words for that? And kind of coming up with a new lexicon for your organization. So, because sadly, I think that, if you use certain words, your applications are going to be rejected, even if they're words used in context or not. And so I would use tools like or a thesaurus, things like that, where you're still doing the work that you're doing, but maybe you're just changing the language so that you can continue to get those grants.
Visit GrantStation to see our latest online education offerings in the form of live webinars, interactive workshops, and on-demand learning. GrantStation.com.